You're listening to Marriage Minute with Pastors Richard and Donna Spears, impacting marriages that leave a lasting legacy.
Hey everybody, how are you today?
Hi, thanks for joining Marriage Minute. We're here, Pastors Richard and Donna Spears, at your service.
Yeah, at your service. That's what we're here to do in the kingdom of God. We're here to serve others, and we just believe by, honey, our life and marriage over the years. I mean, gosh, we're going on this
32.
In September. We're not quite there yet, but in September it'll be 32 years of marriage.
32 years.
So we've learned a few things over the years, and we want to just try to give you guys out there practical advice and solutions to your marriage and marital issues that might be going on, and how to have a successful marriage.
Absolutely.
So that's why we're here.
So we're going to jump right in because we have a tendency to go long, and because God always downloads stuff and drops stuff in our spirit that we need to share. But we also want to be cognizant of your time. If you're catching us on your way to work or on your lunch break, we want to be able to have you be able to listen to what we have to say within that time frame. So Here we go. So last week we talked about the two becoming one flesh, and that is in Mark. I think it's other places too, but it's in the first book of the Bible too,
in
Genesis, and so how important it is to save yourself for marriage, and the implications. That having sex outside of marriage before you're married, or whether you're in an extramarital affair, it has implications, it has consequences. And so we were talking about the two becoming one flesh, the physical act, it binds you together. I mean, it's clear to see, obviously. We were made male and female. We were made to fit together in a certain way. And, and then we said last week that we were going to really talk more about what happens spiritually. Let's just say in your brain, if you will.
Yeah, well, even in your, there's still the physical aspect of your brain, and there's also just the emotional, physiological connection that's taking place as well.
Right, and so that's what we really want to talk about today, because it's not just a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am kind of a thing that people so casually throw around, and all of the stuff out there in society today. So anyway, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so having sex outside of marriage. I think we touched on this a little bit last week when we talked about one flesh, but
we did.
Outside of the marriage covenant, it does have physical and psychological consequences.
So physically, what can happen to us?
Well, physically, I mean, there's so many different STDs that are out there. I mean, even if you've been following the news lately, they've been talking about the monkeypox, and the main way that's being transmitted is through sexual contact. And so there's just so many things out there negatively that can be, obviously AIDS is contracted that way. It can be done through blood transfusions as well, but those are the kinds of concerns that you can have if you don't really know, who your sexual partner is and who they've been with. You're connecting with them on a history that you may not have any knowledge of whatsoever.
And that's a great point. And some of those things, those negative consequences, STDs, diseases, sickness, illnesses, it's not, a condom's not just going to protect you. No. And so you have to think about, which I think it's a great thing that you said, when you interact with someone sexually, when you have sex with someone, you connect with them on that deep level, you're having sex with every single person that they've ever had sex with.
Yeah.
Basically, and that's the short story.
Whatever their, history, with partners, you're connecting with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's something to really think about. I know there's these strong emotions and the desires for connection. But we have to like turn our brain off for a moment. Just those physical drives that we have to want to be connected. We have to turn that off for a moment and really allow ourselves to reason and to think, down the road. What am I actually getting myself into? Absolutely. And is this something that's really going to be helpful to me and my body in my soul and my spirit, or is this going to be a hindrance, and is it going to be a problem for me?
Absolutely.
So we have to take inventory of these things. The other thing that can happen physically is, you could get pregnant.
Exactly. And, it's funny that people will say, well, she got pregnant. Well, it takes two.
It takes two.
It takes two. So even though the man or the male isn't carrying the baby, you're still part of that. Mm-hmm. And that's a responsibility now that you have for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And so that's a very real physical. We use the word consequence.
Yeah.
Babies
it's
are
certainly an outcome.
A blessing, and definitely, it's not their fault. So
right.
I'm not speaking to that part of it, but there's a real consequence of an unwanted pregnancy.
Yeah.
When you have sex.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Sure.
So whether you're a believer or not, and here at Marriage Minute, obviously we come from a biblical, very strong biblical foundational background. Mm-hmm. We make no apologies for that. And so I know we say that a lot, but really the things that we talk about are across the board for believers and non-believers alike. And so whether you are a believer or a non-believer, we can all agree that a union takes place. You become one flesh when you have that physical penetration. When that happens, you're becoming one flesh, literally.
Yeah.
And then you're connected on way, way deeper levels after just the physical side of things.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to touch on that today.
Absolutely.
That's part of it.
Absolutely.
So, we're made up of three. For those of you who know God, have a relationship with God, there's God the Father, there's God the Son, which is Jesus Christ, and there's God the Spirit. So when Jesus came and he was going to be departing and ascending back to heaven, he said he was going to leave a helper or send a helper, which is the Holy Spirit. So God is three, and so we're also three. Mm-hmm. We're made up of a body, physical body. We have a soul, our mind, our will, our emotions, our personality, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then we have the spirit person, the piece of us that actually communes with God, that hears and can pray and seek God out and seek direction for your life. And so those are the three elements of who we are. So let's talk about what happens then in our body, in our soul, if you will, during sex.
Right.
What's really going on.
Right. So have you ever felt like you really connected with someone? Like you meet them and you really connected with them and things just seem right and good, and you just have connected with them on a deeper level than you weren't expecting.
Absolutely.
And you've already been intimate with them, and you've already been physical with them, and you are just feeling this amazing connection, and all you can think about is them, and you just desire them and want them. When can you get back together? Have you ever felt that way? And I would have to say each and every one of us have felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, just so everyone out there knows, okay, Don and I, we had premarital sex.
Yes.
So, and so anyway, we know what that is, we know what that looks like, but we also understand after 32 years of marriage, the power of how God actually designed us to be. Absolutely. So that we would be in a monogamous relationship forever.
And we can say hindsight 2020 vision, hindsight is 2020.
Absolutely.
We wish we would have saved ourselves for each other for marriage, and we would have had that special thing between us. But unfortunately, that's a consequence of being promiscuous before marriage and giving yourself away, not even thinking about it, and not thinking about them being consequences. And that's part of it. That's something that we can't share. We don't have that to share together, and it's just kind of if you think about it, it can be sad.
It can be sad. Yeah, we don't want to live in our past because Jesus redeemed us from our past. He redeemed us from our past, our present, and our future. And so, we don't want to give the devil a foothold in our life and to go down this road of misery and condemnation and things like that. That's only from the devil. But when you reflect on your life, you can learn from your past, and you can do things differently, or you can at least share your experiences to help the next generation, which is what we're trying to do.
Want better for our kids and people that we come in contact with. So go ahead and go into some reasons for why we are so connected when we give ourselves to someone.
Yeah, so, I mean, some view sex as just simply, it's a time of pleasure, it's a time of physical satisfaction, and it is. It truly is all those things. Some feel like, they're completely unaffected by the sexual encounters. Like, okay, I really don't have a connection with this person.
It was just
this,
sex.
I just needed to, be with somebody because I was feeling alone or whatever. And it's just sex, and I'll move on to the next partner that I'm with. And there's really no physical or emotional connection that took place that time. That's people
kind of what they're thinking.
Some people think that, some people believe that, but here in reality, this is what's really taking place. And the cool part about this is the fact that this is how God uniquely designed us as human beings. This is what is really cool about it, and it's going to help you understand how you really connected with someone when you are having sex with them, and why it's so important not to have sex before marriage.
Yeah. It's not that we're being prudish.
No.
There are major reasons.
Yeah, God actually did this. He shares these things with us to actually protect us.
Amen.
So He doesn't want us to get divorced. God hates divorce. He doesn't hate people. He just hates divorce because he understands what that does to people. Because there's even psychological damage from divorce, and it affects your children and your family. So anyway, I digress a little bit, but just to know that God does care about marriage, and he has designed sex to be within marriage for a specific reason. And that's for lifelong commitment to one another. So here's the reality when sex takes place. There's a physiological connection that is actually taking place. There's physical and there's emotions that are involved in this. So what happens? What happens when the man and the woman who are together? What happens when orgasm is reached for both? There's actually chemicals that are being released in your brain.
That's right.
Which is just amazing. And what God does there. And these chemicals, one of which is called dopamine. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist or anything else, but I have listened to some experts that have backgrounds in neuroscience and are Christians, and they relate how these chemicals are, connect our bodies when we're actually having sex with our partners. So dopamine basically is that chemical, that hormone that gets released in the brain that brings that pleasure. It's the pleasure center. It's the desire. It's the motivation to be with someone. And so when you do reach climax in that way, that's a chemical that's actually being released in your brain, and it's more powerful than drugs.
Yeah. That's incredible. Exactly.
And so, if a person struggles with, let's just say, sexual addiction, and they've looked at pornography and they've masturbated and all those other things, well, what's getting released every time, even though it's not with a person,
right?
It's a fantasy, if you will.
Right.
That dopamine is still being released.
And that's what they seek, is that release, because then the after effect is that high.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And it's addicting.
Yeah. And so that's one chemical that gets released in the brain is dopamine, the pleasure chemical, if you will, the pleasure hormone that's getting released in the brain. The other one that's getting released is oxytocin. Now, this one is called the bonding hormone. So this is more, it's prevalent in men, but it's also more prevalent in women. And so, like, even when mothers have a newborn and they're breastfeeding, oxytocin is actually being released during the process of breastfeeding. And that helps to create a bonding between the child and the mother. And the same thing happens there when the man and the woman have sexual intercourse together. Oxytocin is being released in both, more so in the woman than the man, but it is being released, and it's a bonding hormone. It makes you feel closer. It makes you feel affection toward that person. And so it's not just, this is how God actually made us. It's not just that we had the physical act and it's done and over with. No, there's things that are actually happening in our brain that God designed to happen so that we would actually be connected on a deeper level with the person that we're having sexual relations with. And so it's amazing. Do you have some thoughts about that?
It just blows my mind, how intense that can be to think about, because scientifically that's been proven, right? They've studied that,
right?
And so as Christians, we're not anti-science.
No.
But to be able to understand that God designed sex, intimacy for one man and one woman. And it's just gotten so skewed, and to even talk to people about, hey, there's dopamine and there's oxytocin that gets released in your brain. It's very similar to drugs that you're taking that keep you addicted to that.
Right.
It's the same with sex. And I think we live in a day and age where sex is just kind of a casual thing. It's oh yeah, you've had sex with this guy. Did you hook up with this guy or whatever?
Right.
And it's just treated so unholy, if you will.
It is.
I hate to use, or unrighteousness in it. And for people out there, if you're listening, pass this along, share our content. There is actual physiological, psychological feelings, I want to put, and emotions attached to having sex in the act of orgasm or release.
Well, and it even applies to food. So like, when you have chocolate or you have something that you really love, those same chemicals get released for that as well.
Absolutely.
That's why food addictions can happen also.
Absolutely.
So this is like you said, science is real here. We're not denying science. And this is how God. So that's the cool thing about science. Science, for me, I used to struggle with that because of just evolutionary things that were taught in school.
That part of science.
But what I've come to realize about science is actually helping me to discover how God actually created the universe, how God created you and I. And so that's how I view science now. And so I look at it to help expose and to show the truth of what God's actually done in people and actually in our world and our universe. So that's really cool. So let me explain something from a man's perspective, when it comes to these hormones. So men are visual. We're different than ladies. Right. Ladies are more emotionally stimulated. Men are more visually stimulated.
Absolutely.
And so when sex happens with a man, let's just say it's a fantasy thing. So it's pornography or whatever, and it's through masturbation. And so when that happens, that man has a visual representation of whatever he was looking at, the color of hair, the eyes, the shape of the body, whatever. That becomes a pathway, for lack of better, in the brain. So the brain connects with what he is seeing visually. Right. And that becomes like, okay, if I feed that again, I'm going to get this response.
Exactly. It's like Pavlov's dog.
It's like that's exactly right. It's like Pavlov's dog. You ring the dinner bell and the dogs know, they start salivating, they know it's time to eat. Well, it's the same thing with men in our brains. Is that when men see certain visual images, and they connect to that creates that whole stimulation all over again, right?
Absolutely.
So here's the that's the negative side of it. If you're down that road of pornography, or if you're struggling with sexual addiction, that's the negative side of it. But the positive side of that is when you wait until marriage and you have sex with your wife and your wife only, then you have made a pathway. And you've basically wired your brain to look at your wife as the only one that can bring that to you.
Exactly.
And it's not going to be anybody else. It's not going to be an image you see on the internet. And you don't have to self-pleasure to get to that place, because your wife is going to be that person who does that. So that's what happens, like neurologically, what's going on in the man's brain, because we're just so visual that way. But emotionally, I don't know if you can speak to that or not.
I think with the, I'm believing with the oxytocin that gets released, when we are connected through sex to our spouse, it creates that feeling of, we feel more attached, we feel connected on a deeper level. It's not just that we're doing daily life together. So it's not just a physical release and a visual thing like it is for most men. It encompasses, so what that then means is, okay, I feel connected to my husband. I feel more intimate with him. I feel like he knows me and I know him on a deeper level. Well, then that transpires to daily life for a woman, because we're all about needing the love to feel loved and nurtured and protected. And all of that then floods in when you are intimate with your husband, and it creates that beautiful relationship.
Yeah, Amen.
Because sex is meant to be beautiful between a married couple. It's not meant to be distorted and tainted and prostituted, if you will. So
and perverse
and perverted. So that's not what it was meant. That's man's doing. That's happened obviously from the beginning of time, but that doesn't have anything to do with God.
Yeah.
God's design for sex and marriage is holy and righteous, and that's what He wants for us.
Yeah. So there's a book in the Bible called Song of Songs, and it's basically a back and forth between a husband and wife, or soon to be husband and wife, and their love for one another and how they view each other. And it's basically it's for marriage, but it also is like an allegory for God's love toward His people, and toward Israel, toward and Jesus Christ toward His bride, which is the church, which is God's people. But it also is applicable for marriage. And I just want to read an excerpt from Song of Songs, chapter 4, verses 1 through 15. And I'm reading from the New Living Translation. I want you to just hear what Solomon is saying about his future bride. Here's what he says. He says, "You are beautiful, my darling, beautiful beyond words. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil. Your hair falls in waves like a flock of goats winding down the slopes of Gilead." Now, that's a little tough, but I mean, this particular goats, who knows what they look like, but it must have been just the way they tried to communicate to one another. Your teeth are as white as sheep, recently shorn and freshly washed. Your smile is flawless. Each tooth is matched with its twin. Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is inviting. Your cheeks are like rosy pomegranates behind your veil. Your breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle grazing among the lilies. Before the dawn breezes blow and the night shadows flee, I will hurry to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense. So you are altogether beautiful, my darling, beautiful in every way. So,
and it goes on.
There's more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this whole book is just this whole love letter, if you will, between the bride, the future bride, and the future husband, just talking about him. Now, Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. And so these are words coming from him to his future bride and his bride to him. And so that's a whole very powerful book in the Bible when it speaks about marriage. But it just speaks to that whole visualization that men have toward their wives and how they see them and how that's so important. But it, also you'll see if you read through the book how the emotional piece that you just spoke about, that the bride speaks about toward her husband,
absolutely,
and future husband comes out. But
so that is Song of Songs. It's in chapter 4, verses 1 through 15. If you guys want to check that out,
So we didn't read all of it, but anyway, we gave you enough to realize that hey, there's some spiciness in the book, in the Bible.
Read the Bible. It's not boring. If you think it is, you're not reading it correctly.
Right. It's got its own romance novel contained within. But hey, look, God designed us in such a way so that when we do have sex, it connects us like glue to our spouse.
Amen. Plain and simple. That's really a great analogy because that's exactly what it does. And so, if you're out there and you are being promiscuous about sex and you are doing whatever with whomever, just take a minute and stop and think about it. Cherish yourself and value yourself more than that, because God certainly does cherish you and value you more than that. You are more than just someone that needs to give themselves away in that way to feel valued and to feel appreciated and loved. You need to think more highly of yourself. I guess I'll just leave it there.
Yeah,
so
I think that's great advice. And so, this is why, when we talk about this today, this topic of, the sex connection, that's why premarital sex is dangerous. There's the physical ramifications of it, the STDs, the pregnancy potentials, but there's also the physiological things, the bonding that's taking place because of just how God designed us to be and what's actually happening in our brains and what's getting released. That's why pornography is dangerous. Because it's not a physical act, but it's still sin. We'll call it what it is, And it's dangerous because for men, you're visually connecting to images, and you're creating these neural pathways, for lack of better, that drive your stimulation. And that's where this addiction comes into play. And then that's where self-pleasuring masturbation becomes dangerous, because if you can just
for men and women.
Yeah, if you can, and the statistics are on the rise. More women are masturbating and self-pleasuring now, not as much as men, but it is on the rise. But it's dangerous also, because now it's back to, you don't need to have a commitment. When we talked about lack of commitment and things like that, and fear of commitment, I think we talked on our live stream. These are reasons for that. Why do I need to have connection with somebody or make a commitment to somebody when I can just self-pleasure?
Right.
There's so many
Just
ways for
take
me
care
to
of
do that.
myself.
So that's why these things are dangerous, but that's why God designed us in such a way so that we would have a monogamous, lifelong commitment to one another that's unbreakable. Because when these kinds of physiological things are happening in our bodies, in our brains, God wanted us to be connected as a lifelong commitment to our spouses.
There's blessing
and to one another.
Protection in that.
Absolutely. So thanks for joining us today, everyone. I hope this has been helpful. We hope this has been helpful for you to just talk about physically and physiologically what's happening in our bodies and in our brains, and why God designed us this way. And certainly read the Song of Psalms. It's a powerful book. It's a book on marriage and relationship. It'll certainly be a help to you. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys. Catch us next week, next Tuesday, new and exclusive content. We love you.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening today. Catch all of our podcasts at revivalnow.com, and send us your Marriage Minute questions at marriageminute@revivalnow.com.